I actually started setting up a Steam page, which I was very, very, very excited about. That was cool for being able to get it up and have something that people could look at as a sort of home base for the whole project, I guess. That was, I guess, at the point where I started deciding that I was going to be a bit more serious about it and actually, like if I wanted to either sell it or have it picked up by a publisher and that kind of thing, then that would be the preferable route. Then we did another demo in September, and it looks like at this point I disabled the pixelation sort of effect. So you can see we're starting to get the look of the arena being a lot closer to what it looks like now in NV3. So we've got the Reaver doing the weak blast and then the strong blast. Those particles looked way less impressive than they do now. And there's the void cannon. Yeah, so we're starting to get a little bit more of the gameplay loop. The juggernauts were sort of bright orange at that point. There's the void cannon working as intended. Ooh. And yeah, you can see the performance is starting to tank a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the video that much, but you can sort of see the frame rate tanking a little bit. And that was part of the main thing that led me to redoing the entire thing and basically rebuilding it as NV3. I can't remember how long it took me to do that. I think that was after maybe about a year or something of development, so I think it took a while. But it did happen eventually because, yeah, the main reason was actually that Unity's versioning thing kind of messed me up a little bit because I upgraded to a new version of Unity and just a whole bunch of stuff just stopped working. And I realized that newer versions of Unity had some serious performance issues. So I don't know, someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong about that, but I did some tests and it seemed like with bare bones scenes set up in the newer versions of Unity, the performance and the frame rate was just way lower than using older versions of Unity. Yeah, like part of the reason why I was led to that decision of redoing Necromancer and rebuilding it as NV3 is because, yeah, I was hearing some forum posts and that kind of thing where other people had experienced similar issues. But anyway, we'll get to that later when we actually get up to NV3. Then Necromancer officially got to having a Steam page. It'd look like the current Steam page now, but back then it would have had the original screenshots from the game at that point. And then, yeah, I was doing things like trying to get Necromancer being part of the Steam Game Festival back then, which is what it used to be called. Now it's called the Steam Next Fest, I believe. Yeah, so back then you could be part of one of these, and I think you had to sort of wait until about a year until you could do another one. And I think they have sort of made it so that you can participate in one Next Fest now, but then, yeah, you're only allowed to participate in one Next Fest per game. So because I did my Next Fest back when it was Steam Game Festival and not Steam Next Fest, I ended up, I guess, using my chance there. But they've sort of got a clause or something in there that says that, yeah, like I can actually participate in another one because I did this before they sort of changed their policy regarding that. So I can actually participate in another Next Fest at this point, but I think I'd probably wait until I can potentially get a publisher involved because it would be a lot more useful to be able to make use of the marketing power of a publisher rather than trying to do it all by myself. And then, yeah, I started doing a little bit more live streaming and that kind of thing. We're starting to get closer and closer to the current iteration. Then we started getting the leaderboards up. So yeah, so the leaderboards are where I think things probably start getting a little bit more interesting community-wise, and that's still something that's, you know, going to be built up over time, and it'd be great to see some more people competing, but yeah, all in good time. I think there's been a pretty good turnout with the leaderboards already, but yeah, would always love more people on the leaderboard. So version 5 of the playable demo. Demo is being built alongside the full version as a taste of the full eldritch horror to come. Yeah, so this is what it looked like at that stage. So I think this is kind of what it ended up looking like around about that time. In terms of like the smoothness, I guess that was okay. Oh geez, look at that frame rate. I think this is visually, to be honest, probably one of the worst points of Necromancer, unfortunately. Because, yeah, you can kind of see, for some reason I decided that everything should be red, and it just kind of means that everything kind of blurs together as this hot mess. And then, yeah, there's a lot of very oversaturated and clashing colors and that kind of thing. You know, there was some visual changes, and a lot of it was, you know, what I was saying before about struggling with trying to visually demonstrate or communicate what's happening in the game. And you can see the terrors are starting to come up now as well. That was something that I always struggled with, and this is, I think, where I was struggling with that the most. So that eventually would end up being reworked. And yeah, I was trying to do lots of things like, oh, look at that, that's so bad. But you know, doing things like sort of double helixes around the really important enemies, because I wanted to try and show that these are guys that you can kill. But yeah, but there's so much going on there, and it's just really, really difficult to tell what's going on. And in the so that thankfully eventually ended up being, oh geez, and the performance was ultra tanked as well. So yeah, so that was that was maybe a dark part of the NV2 development cycle. But, you know, part of the process. And then I decided that I was going to delay the release, you know, because I wanted to participate in Steam Game Festival. You would only really be eligible for the Steam Game Festival if you were planning on releasing your game within the next year or so. So I, at that point, was feeling, you know, like I'm reasonably happy with it, and I think that this could be basically released within about a year or so. So I set that task, and, you know, like they said in the documentation and everything that, you know, like, things happen, sometimes you need to delay your game. And so I sort of, you know, I guess, had that in my mind at the back of my head. But yeah, but I decided after thinking about it long and hard that I did actually want to do it properly and not just kind of rush it just for the sake of being eligible for a game festival and that kind of thing. So I decided that I would actually put it off, and yeah, actually make the decision to delay it and give it some more time so that I could actually develop it properly and make it the game that I want it to be, rather than this sort of rushed and half-finished thing that it was at that point. And yeah, that's something that I think is part of my philosophy as a game developer. I am more on the side of taking longer for something, and, you know, it sucks when it's not on schedule, I guess, but I do think that it is more important to take longer over something and make sure that it's something that you're absolutely happy with and that people are gonna enjoy, as opposed to just, I don't know, just releasing it half-baked and, you know, doing a sort of a half-assed job because of, you know, deadlines and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it really depends, you know, timing and budgets and deadlines and all that sort of thing are definitely important and something that need to be considered. But I didn't really actually have a deadline, or I didn't have any reason to put a deadline to it at that point. So I felt that the smarter decision was to just let it take as long as it needs to, so that I can make sure that I actually release something that's a really quality game. And then, yeah, so some more updates, April 2021. So that was after a year of development. 1 year into it is when the variant system started coming up. So this is when we started having, you know, the ability to upgrade your weapons and that kind of thing, but you've got a chance of getting a bunch of different weapons. So this is where I think, you know, trying to bring back the sort of roguelike element is where I think I was trying to do that at that point. Partial controller support as well, which is part of the new iteration as well, but I think there's maybe a few bugs that still need to be ironed out, so I'll be looking to do that as soon as I can. But yeah, but there's a bunch of stuff that I'm doing these days. I'm really focusing on a bunch of marketing stuff and trying to get design documents and that kind of thing sorted so that I can pitch this to publishers. So that was when the variant system came up, and also I migrated from the standalone input system, or the I think it's called input manager in base Unity, and then I started putting it into input system, because yeah, I felt that input system was going to be, well, it's what Unity I think is promoting as their general sort of way forward with regards to input, and also yeah, it seems to be just a little bit more intuitive for controllers and yeah, multi-platform support and that kind of thing. Then that was the point at which it looks like I decided to rebuild it and do Necromancer version 3. So that took a fair while. I think, yeah, at a certain point it started just becoming more and more stressful, and I just kind of started really getting demotivated and just kind of really feeling that things were just a lot of work, and I kind of was feeling really lost in terms of where I should be putting my efforts and, you know, how to make the game better. And, you know, as I was still struggling with things like the visual clarity and, like, you know, making it feel like the game was fun in the way that I wanted it to be. And it seemed like no matter what I was doing, it was still never quite getting there, or the improvements that I was making was so incremental and so much of an uphill struggle. I wouldn't say that it felt like it wasn't worth doing, but it was just very difficult to choose where I should be spending my efforts. And then you know, actually put effort in those areas. So, yeah, so that was at the point where I basically decided to rebuild it. So, 25th December 2021. Yeah, I think this is starting to get into current iteration of Necromancer. So, this was Christmas Eve 2021. And so, yeah, so this is when I was starting to get some videos together for being able to publish about that. Oh, no, this is when I actually released the trailer for it. So, yeah, so this, I guess, yeah, we might as well watch the trailer since that is what things look like. Is this the same trailer as what we've got currently? I think it might be. Yeah, I think this is the current trailer that we've got now. So we've gone forward in time, folks. We're catching up. So it took a good long while to be able to rebuild a lot of the stuff that, you know, needed to be rebuilt and make it look like it needed to look. Most of it was just kind of like just redoing the references. Because I basically just copied all of the code from NV2, but all the visual stuff, all the scenes and everything, that needed to be basically rebuilt. So that was a good time to sort of refresh things. But I am so glad that I did that, because after having rebuilt it, just everything was just so much better. All of the project files and everything were kind of all put together, and they were all where they were supposed to be. It was just really easy to figure out where everything was. I knew the sort of layout of my project a lot better. I sort of made things a lot more modular, so things were able to be more self-reliant. I don't know how to explain it to, you know, anyone who's not a programmer, but the idea of sort of modular components and being able to plug and play things or attach components to things without having them rely as much on other components, that was super important, and that's a lot more of a thing in Necromancer version 3, whereas, you know, since I was still learning coding in a lot of ways while I was building NV1 and NV2, that was something that I didn't do as much because I didn't realize how important it was back then. But then as I built NV3, yeah, making a lot more of the components a little bit more self-contained, where they didn't sort of rely on other things and end up in what we refer to as spaghetti code, stuff like that. Yeah, so that ended up factoring in a lot less. And then, yeah, like, you know, lots of improvements to visual clarity, just kind of generally tidying a whole bunch of stuff up, and massive performance improvements. Because, yeah, that was one of the things that was frustrating me the most, because I was really trying to debug where I was losing so much performance. And I think having redone the project and redone the materials and the graphics and that kind of thing really helped with being able to figure out where I was using excessive draw calls. The graphics renderer was just kind of doing way more work than it needed to, so I was sort of standardizing materials a little bit more, standardizing shaders a little bit more, and then other things like inefficient uses of finding functions and methods and that kind of thing. You know, because I was using a lot of things like, for anyone who's actually done some Unity or C#, using things like find object of type or game object.find, which was super performance heavy and very inefficient in terms of being able to find references in your code. So, you know, doing things more like serialize field and direct references and that kind of thing was massively improving performance and preventing, you know, things like having to find things manually by the code in the update loop, as opposed to it just knows where it is. And stuff like that was hugely improving performance, so having done that, that improved the state of it into NV3 quite a lot. So yeah, so now we've got version 3.1.0 of Necromancer version 3. This is sort of getting into the point where I started actually doing, what's the word, change logs and that kind of thing. So yeah, so at this point, so June 22nd, before I started doing NV3, is when I decided to move the release date to TBD. And yeah, the main reason behind that is, yeah, like at that point, you know, especially starting to think about redoing it for NV3, I was starting to think that I didn't actually have a proper idea at that point of when the game's going to be released. I still don't, to be honest. That's something that I still am working on, and I'm trying to put together things like budget structures and timelines and all that sort of stuff. So I'm still working on that at this very stage, but I think I've laid a lot of the framework for that, so it's just a matter of kind of finalizing it, and then I can start pitching it to people. But yeah, but that's still a little bit of a work in progress. Then version 3, the Holiday Mancer update. New update, new leaderboard, new trailer, unit animations, total rebuild, improvements to visual clarity and performance, and launch pads removed to make way for a teleport mechanic. And yeah, that was another big change, I think, because the launch pads, unfortunately, were making for some pretty cheesy gameplay, and it meant that you could kind of just use them as a way of getting away from any tricky situations, and they ended up being kind of spammed, especially when you were getting into the higher levels of the leaderboard. So people who got really good at being able to abuse those got really far. That doesn't mean to say that the people at the top ends of the leaderboard were, you know, like just cheesing it. I think, generally speaking, aside from a few bugs, you know, somewhere down the line, most of the time, yeah, the people who were at the top end of the leaderboard were very, very skilled and were pulling off some very crazy gameplay. So, good job for people who are managing to make it to the leaderboard back then. I might actually read this out because I think this is kind of part of that process that's worth noting with regards to what happened with version 3, so maybe this explains more what I was thinking at the time. So, well, it's been a total cluster beep of a year, rife with a bunch of craziness. After realizing that an update to the newest version of Unity ended up decreasing performance significantly, which was meaning absolute garbage FPS, along with realizing how many things were just messy and not how I wanted the game to be looking and functioning, it turned out the best solution to it was just rebuilding the Unity project from the ground up. It wasn't a complete do-over, at least I had all the old scripts, models, and audio assets, but the project scenes needed to be completely built again. I also went through all the models for the environment and units, doing cleanup operations to dramatically reduce the vertex counts. Oh yeah, that was actually crazy. I had a lot of really unoptimized 3D models and meshes in version 2. The average vertex count in V2 was over 1 million, usually more, so that's just in any camera scene, or, you know, like just, you know, looking at the arena in general through the camera, and now it's closer to 300,000 to 400,000. I did a bunch of debugging and looking at performance sinks, and reduced unnecessary graphics draw calls and inefficient object find operations. Always fun looking at your noob work from way back and having to rework that stuff. So having now done that, though it took a good month of backtracked progress, I can now say that it's been fully worth it. The game is now looking and playing much better than it used to, and a lot closer to something that I can just be genuinely proud of. There are a lot of delays, such as life stuff, COVID lockdown, work stuff. My computer just decided it wanted to end itself and needing a new replacement CPU and motherboard, and other miscellaneous shenanigans. So regardless, I've been able to keep myself comparatively sane with this project, and it's been a blast making it better than it was before. New leaderboard. Since the mechanics have changed a bit by now, I figure it's time for there to be a refreshed leaderboard so that people can compete with the new mechanics. Store page now has an updated trailer. Most important enemies now have actual animations. This should help with making them a bit more dynamic rather than just floating statues. Revenants and basic enemies now have a melee bomb attack to discourage letting armies of them get too close to you. More melee attacks and enemy dynamics to come in later updates. Numerous other stat tweaks. So a complete visual overhaul, not only for performance purposes, but also for visual clarity. Visual clarity being a big focus of the rebuild, as this was a common complaint for a lot of people. Launch pads removed, at least for now, as this tended to increase issues with visual clarity, and also ended up making for pretty cheesy gameplay, as it allowed for very easy dodging tricky situations and get people into loops of just running for launch pads constantly. This has been replaced with a teleport mechanic acquired from the Spirit Altar, which allows you to instantly relocate to another location or altar, but has a 40-ish second cooldown, and I'd recommend redoing the tutorial to familiarize yourself with this. There's still a long way to go before I can call this project done, but hopefully not too much longer before I can do something like a proper early access of the full game. If there's bugs, please do let me know, and blah blah blah. That is what it was looking like at that stage. Version 3.1 in February. So that's February this year. So yeah, we're getting very close to modern day now. And yeah, so this is where I started actually doing change logs, because, you know, that's important. Fixed an issue of the timer still running when falling off a cliff. Revenants now use Boyd logic. Collision walls on altars improved. Targeting has an element of randomization added, so that aggro can't be completely negated by positioning and summoning. So release date is next week, you say? Yeah, totally. Because the game got sort of bigger, it meant that when you were sort of sitting on the altars and that kind of thing, the enemies would almost completely ignore you. So that was something that I didn't want to factor into the proper gameplay loop. So I ended up wanting to have still a little bit of aggression focused on you even when you're chilling on an altar and even when you've got summons taking some of the aggro. So you can rely on the summons to take some of your aggro, but not all of it. So you still have to be a little bit on your toes even when you're at an altar and your summons are in the middle of the arena. Summoning buffed, slightly more units are now summoned at once. Summons also have a chance to pick a random target rather than the nearest unit. Coyote time added for jumping, so a short delay of being considered not grounded after walking off ledges, etc. So that means that you could actually jump off of a ledge and there's a very short amount of time where you can actually still jump up even when there's technically no ground underneath you. Slightly faster walk speed. Elite Revenants are now tougher, or in terms of more HP. Both Revenants faster and more aggressive. Orb speed faster. Revenants now attempt to flank and skirt around the player at close range while lobbing melee explosives. Snub-nose shots faster and more accurate. Dreadnoughts now one-shot but shoot less often. Juggernauts and Dreadnoughts now ignore other targets and prioritize the player on spawn. Recommendation for tutorial at the beginning if you don't have any PB or any personal best or high score recorded. And yeah, so now version 3.1.1, which is just back in April. It's like completely spaced. So the date itself has already passed something like a week ago, but it warrants celebration. So a 2-year anniversary of Necro development. Banshee and Longinus charge time reduced. Finally, yeah, there's a little text that tells you what you're killed by. So a lot of these I think are probably just sort of mechanical or like sort of stat changes. Improvements to the skybox shader. Lots of visual changes to reduce color saturation levels. So that took 2 years to figure out that I needed to do that. Yeah, color theory is something that I kind of know as a visual artist, but I've never actually done any formal visual art stuff. I think I've always preferred to just kind of figure it out myself and just kind of learn and feel intuitively what looks good in art. So learning proper color theory is something that took a while, and I'm still learning it, honestly. Starting to decrease the saturation levels in general and balance the color palette out a little bit more is starting to happen a lot more these days. Improvements on finding operations made banking not possible when all weapons or upgrades from an altar had been attained. So that actually helps a lot with being able to make sure that you're not sort of wasting souls or just kind of having mechanics of the game kind of be detrimental by accident, because I think the more of the gameplay that's intentional and built for the player to do things with intention, that's kind of stuff that I want to focus on and implement in the game a little bit more. Change the sizes of a lot of the units to make them easier to hit and also more imposing. Made units die if their Y position reaches a certain level below ground to prevent clipping issues with the AI, because AIs would be trying to find targets that are underground and not being able to hit them, so they end up just kind of being locked in a loop. UI towers no longer use Roman numerals. So this means towers near the weapon and passive folders can be used to see how many souls have been banked when playing HUDless. Made the tutorial script show what weapons are given when multiple upgrades are auto-unlocked at the tutorial for player to try out. The Liches now have 2 other spells, a Wandering Pillar that one-shots and a shotgun of 3 avoidable pillars. So yeah, that is basically pretty much up to date with where we're at the moment. Maybe what would be a good idea is to just do a little bit more gameplay and just show you guys what it looks like now. I feel like having the context of the development cycle and everything, I think it's probably worth showing you what that's ended up culminating in at this current point in time. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So let's just do, I don't know, maybe a run or two. So this is what the menu looks like now. Very different to what it used to look like. So people who have been watching me on this channel or who know me IRL have probably seen a bunch of this already, but I feel like it's worth adding the context back now that we've gone through the whole history of everything. Oh yeah, and there's also the dash attack, which ended up being built at a certain point. Yeah, we've got actual HUDs as opposed to just, you know, the in-game HUD stuff. Why am I so bad at my own video game? So, having actually gone through all of that and looking, especially at the stuff from NV1, has kind of made me remember some of the things that I initially intended that I haven't been able to factor in. So even things like blood and shadows and that kind of thing, yeah, I really need to get that stuff in here again. And even mechanics like, you know, leaving actual dead bodies around that can be resurrected. That's stuff that I do actually want to get back into this game. I just never actually got the chance to do it. So even now, being honest, there's still probably some improvements to the visual clarity that I think can be done. But yeah, as I've said, it's a struggle, and it's a big work in progress, so all in good time. But I do think it does look a lot better than it used to, and there's a lot more visual clarity. When I have got some time to be able to develop on this a little bit more, I'll probably be looking at changing the health mechanics up a little bit. So that's one of the sort of like future changes. So yeah, so hopefully in time I'll be able to get probably a lot more weapons would be nice. Maybe not a massive focus because I don't want it to get too cluttered in terms of the weapon options. I do really like these big summons just having a massive barrage of things to kill you with. I bet I'm gonna actually PB, but because I'm playing it offline mode, I'm not gonna be able to, like, even have it recorded. Here's hoping. I think this is the big lull when there's supposed to be a boss, but in the full version, there's a lot more happening. Oh boy. Things are getting hectic. Holy Jesus, there are so many green guys! Ah! This is difficult. I think this is actually PB territory for me. So this is actually a damn shame that I'm playing in offline mode, because this would straight up be a PB for me. There are so many dudes. Oh, terrifying. This is getting very hectic and there are a lot of dudes here. Oh god, so many purple pillars. Oh, I think I'm dead. Oh god. That was hectic. That was very, very, very hectic. I think I could have definitely done that better if I managed my annihilation buffs better. But, and also sort of like just prioritized aiming a little bit more. But yeah, that was when things started getting to be a whole ass mess. Thanks, Loco. Yeah, so that would have been a PB. It's not going to go on the leaderboard because I'm on offline mode, but yeah. So for anyone who remembers, I'm at 1149, honorary position on the leaderboard. Alright, well, that I think should do it in terms of running through the current version. So yeah, so I actually had a fair bit of fun with that, especially since that ended up getting into the PB territory. That's what we're looking like at this stage. And yeah, I think I can be pretty proud of that, and I'm pretty happy with the state that it's in at the moment. Always more to improve, and you know, like more stuff that's still yet to come, but I'm pretty happy with what that's looking like at the moment. So yeah, so I mean, just generally speaking, what I'm looking at in terms of the sort of overall thing, there's a whole bunch of features. Like I've got a whole sort of list of features and kind of budgeting how many hours that would take and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like, you know, a whole bunch of different gameplay stuff. So I mean, the main thing that I didn't show there, because I sort of want to leave it to the full version, is things like the final boss and like penultimate bosses and stuff like that. Other mechanics and sort of like reworking the mechanics a little bit so that they're a little bit more intuitive. A lot more of a focus on things like lore and achievements and that kind of thing. I think what I am probably going to opt for, and this is sort of like a recent idea, so I don't actually know if I'm going to go ahead with it, but I'm kind of thinking that it'd be cool to do something like have a Binding of Isaac style system where you have achievements or particular tasks that you need to sort of pull off, and then if you can achieve those tasks, then that's going to be what leads you to unlocking more weapons and upgrades for consecutive runs. And yeah, sort of similar to Binding of Isaac, I don't necessarily want unlocks to mean that you can just straight up win the game by getting certain unlocks. But yeah, unlocks that add more things to the game so that it adds a little bit more dynamic, and it means that each successive playthrough is going to be a little bit different, and it's not just going to be the same stuff every time. So yeah, I think that could be really cool. And then yeah, like I think a lot more community stuff, like if I can get a sort of replay mechanic going, then that would be really cool as well. And then I'm also thinking of even like random stuff like sort of party mode, where you could maybe have sort of something like a controller that you can hand off, and then you can sort of do high scores that are local as opposed to something that's submitted to the leaderboard. And it's just kind of like, you know, you can hand it off to a friend of yours and, you know, have different people playing it, something like that. I don't know how many people would play this kind of game at a party, but, you know, whatever, one can hope. And what else? Like more enemies, more weapons, more upgrades. And yeah, like, and definitely, as I said, like a bigger focus on lore and that kind of thing. I am actually crafting a pretty big universe. I was actually up until like 4 in the morning last night thinking of ideas of the timeline of events that kind of leads up to this world looking as it is. So yeah, like this whole environment, and you know, like why it looks the way that it does, and what's leading you to being in this trial, and you know, the sort of sequence of events that generally is what created this world and all that sort of stuff. I'm also starting to look at getting more people on board. So up until now, it's been a project that has been completely, basically just me by myself developing the whole thing. But yeah, I'm keen to get more people involved in terms of music and art, maybe even little bits of voice acting, maybe even development as well. I need to sort of think about that and, you know, like start approaching people and seeing who'd be interested in developing this game. A lot of it is a little bit tricky in terms of like how to sort out budgeting and that kind of thing. That's all kind of alien territory to me, so I'm still getting used to that. But yeah, I've had a lot of friends and people giving me some really good advice and giving me tips on how to manage the whole development and the general, let's say, business life cycle of it. That is some pretty exciting stuff. Yeah, I guess like one of the most recent updates that is pretty exciting as far as this, well, not only this, but as well as the development of, well, this game as well as like future projects, is I have now incorporated Void Productions as an actual New Zealand company, so that's really exciting. At the moment it kind of sounds cooler than it is, because it's basically a company in name with no employees and no revenue or anything like that, but hopefully all in good time that it actually start happening. And I'm really looking forward to actually being able to pay people for doing something that they actually like. And there's always maybe going to be a little bit of a separation between how passionate I am about this project versus how passionate other people can be on a project that isn't their own brainchild. But I think that generally a lot of people, especially in my sort of peer groups and creative circles, it seems like there's a lot of people who want to do things that are more creative. They can't necessarily get as much revenue from it or get enough money to pay the bills and that kind of thing, so they usually end up having to go for the more standardized 9-to-5 desk jobs and that kind of thing. What I really want for the future of my company is to be able to sort of pay people to do the stuff that they love a little bit more, as opposed to just, you know, the stuff that pays the bills. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing in time if I can. But I guess there's probably not that much more that I can really go into in terms of what I've been talking about so far. I think I've probably said I've been talking for 2.5 hours now, so I'm actually not feeling too bad or too tired or anything, even considering that I was up at 4 in the morning. But coffee helps, and yeah, had a delicious cup of coffee before I got started with streaming today. But yeah, so thank you so much for joining, for anyone who is here currently. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching me go through and take a little trip down memory lane and look at all the different things that I've been developing, mostly for Necromancer and that kind of thing. I'll hopefully see you guys again sometime soon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. So yeah, take it easy guys, catch you later.